Today I want to talk about The End of Vandalism by Tom Drury. This is billed as a novel, which I found interesting because I remember reading his work in the early 90s, and it was published by The New Yorker. Back then, those pieces I had always treated as individual short stories with just some recurring characters, but come to find out, they were in fact chapters of a novel, this book right here. And it's interesting to me because the New Yorker is not really known for extensively serializing a person's work, maybe Truman Capote back in the day, but not really new writers, which Tom Drury was back then. So what struck me about those stories was that how bland and uneventful they were, and I just sort of dismissed them at the time as, your typical New Yorker story. And I don't know if that was a really fair assessment. So when I saw this book, I want to reassess that and see if those pieces may have worked if they cohered together as a whole even better, or if, like a lot of first-time writers would do, is just publish various short stories with linked characters and then collect them in their first work and then call it a novel, but that would be like using very loose terminology there. I wanted to see if that was the case. So I reread this material and quickly became refamiliarized with the characters. There's the main character, Sheriff Dan Norman, and his new love interest, Louise Darling, and her ex-husband, Tiny Darling. This takes place in a fictional county called Grouse County, somewhere in the Midwest, I believe Iowa. And there's just the first third of the book introduces a lot of characters. There's so many characters in this book that the author felt obliged to list them all out at the end here. But basically it's just a depiction of Midwestern small town life. It's very meandering and breezy, and episodic. I didn't really see a clear plot line from the get-go. There's just little events that happen here and there, which I found kind of at odds with how clear the prose style was. I got the sense that Tom Drury valued characterization and plot above all else, because stylistically, I suspected, during his composition that he would suppress any poetic impulse, any opportunities for metaphors or, alliteration or anything like any detectable proclivities, that he would just kind of flatten it out. And the syntax is very simple. It's independent clause, conjunction, independent clause, dependent clause, maybe a participle phrase here and there, but I would call it like extremely smooth, polished prose, kind of like if this were held up for consideration in an MFA program, there would just really be no criticism of it. And in fact, I think some MFA students might benefit from studying this book just from the craft perspective. So given that, as I was reading the book, the prose was pulling me along, but I didn't feel any grab with the characters. Like I said, there's so many characters, and then they just come on stage and say a few lines, and then the scene shifts. And the episodes were just kind of traditional realism. I didn't find it interesting or strange enough. It's certainly easy to play that Midwest / strange or magic realism card, but he definitely doesn't do that. But I was reading on, and there was really a lack of tension, I guess, and even a hint of coyness or like tongue-in-cheek. The prose felt neutered to me. It was like borderline cute, which I kind of found disgusting. And, if we compare to other writers who have a very, simple, two-dimensional clean line like early Raymond Carver or Flannery O'Connor. With those writers, they have this sort of foreboding sense of doom, like clouds on the horizon. Whereas this writer, I always got the sense that it was like sunny in his world every day, page after page. It would just be more sun. And as a result, I kind of expected some sort of tragedy to occur towards the end, just to counterbalance the lack of it, the vacuum of drama. And I guess eventually, when the drama does occur, it is. I would say it works well with his prose style. The prose became really charged and alive, and I think it pairs really well with the strategy. I mean, the tragedy. I felt like I was living the pain that some of these characters go through, but overall, I didn't feel like it was enough. Like it was enough to balance the lead up to it, and I felt like I wanted more towards the end. So I don't know. Overall, I guess I would have to look at this book and think, okay, well, is it just an examination of the sublime? Because if the author is presented with a choice of, let's say, like at the end of any section or chapter, authors may try to become grand at those moments, but this writer purposefully chooses to be bland. He may just give you a little drop of literary oil, but I was just thirsting for more. Perhaps this might be looked at as something nostalgic, some sort of unplugged Midwestern lifestyle, pre-smartphone era, when people actually had conversations with each other and they had empathy towards each other. Empathy towards strangers or people considered weird, sort of town kinship. I think this book would also be good for people who are extremely stressed out, and then they get on an airplane and they're on their way to their beach vacation. Then they open this book and just start reading it. I think it's a good, it's a good sedative, I'd say. But yeah, there's other writers I like who kind of practice this quiet style of writing, like Kazuo Ishiguro and Cheng-Rae Lee. There's a Norwegian writer named Tarjei Vesaas who I really admire, and that kind of quiet style goes well. In this case, it's sort of like you go to the App Store and you purchase or you download an app that's free, and it's a light version of an app which you would normally pay for, the full version. And this book to me is like the light version of possibly a greater work that I don't know if it exists or does. I haven't read anything else by this writer, but ultimately the chapters, they don't really quite make a whole. It didn't work for me as a novel, but I can see how if this novel itself was part of a larger whole, like a volume series of novels, kind of like a Midwestern human comedy, I think then it'd be worthy of further consideration.